Good morning and welcome to The Point. It is Tuesday, November the 3rd, 2020. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, those of you watching on GBN TV, channel 7, 11 and 20, and good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9. This morning our guest is former opposition leader Michael Baptiste, a former agriculture minister as well, and we are talking matters of national importance and, well, yeah, international business as well. Good morning, Mr. Baptiste.
Oh, pleasant morning to you and pleasant morning to all the listeners out there. Oh, this morning, the pleasure is mine, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Loving the hat. Black Lives Matter. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to start with international business because that's one of the biggest things happening today. The U.S. elections, President Trump versus former Vice President Joe Biden. And as somebody in the U.S., your thoughts on the proceedings in the U.S., the elections, what direction you think it would go, where you're hoping it would go? Share with us your thoughts on the U.S. elections.
Well, today is a historic day in America. It can be best described as the United States of anxiety, because millions of people, both here and abroad, are looking towards this election. It is a historic election in terms of it's the first time that America is having an election of that magnitude. It's an election during a pandemic. It's an election to pick not just the president of the United States, but the leader of the free world. And it is so important because as we're in the midst of this pandemic, we're into the second wave. Millions of people already died around the world and over 200,000 in the United States. People are nervous. The world economy have collapsed. And this election means a lot. It would determine whether or not the leader of the free world put a kinder and a gentler approach to this pandemic, or if it is same helter-skelter and wayward type leadership that the world was getting, not just America, but the world was getting from Donald Trump. So people are sitting on edge. It's the first time that I've seen a U.S. election with so much violence and so much hype. But hopefully by tomorrow morning or maybe late tonight, we will have an idea as to where we're heading. All bets are on Joe Biden, but of course in 2016, bets was on Hillary Clinton as well, and she didn't come true. But this time, I believe the stakes are too high. I believe we have seen record turnout all over the country. People are voting early. They're standing in line. It's the first time so many people have voted early. So I think the result would be decisive very early. There is some concern about the mail-in ballots. The president earlier has packed the Supreme Court with conservatives, with people who he believes if there is some controversy in the election, they might swing it his way, as they did with Al Gore and as they did to George Bush and Al Gore a few years ago. So there are concerns, but I believe tonight it might be a knockout. I don't feel it may go down to, it won't be on points, they say in boxing. I think tonight Joe Biden will knock out Trump early tonight, so there'll be no need for the Supreme Court to intervene.
There have been queries from Caribbean nationals really as to how this U.S. election can affect us quite over here, as we say, quite over here in the Caribbean. Why you think we should be looking on with interest at this election, how it would affect Grenadians, the Caribbean?
Well, it is not just Grenada, but the world. And the Caribbean in particular, because, President Trump has labeled places like Grenada and Haiti. I can't tell you the kind of the adjectives he used to describe these islands, these third world countries. So quite naturally, people are rooting for Joe Biden, and they're rooting for him because at stake too is the immigration issue. Joe Biden has promised that if he's elected the 11 million undocumented aliens in the United States, he would give them a path to citizenship. So I think that more than ever is what the Caribbean people and of course Caribbean nationals in the United States, I think that's why they're rooting for Joe Biden, because it will give them the opportunity to legalize their status, as opposed to President Trump, who had an aggressive approach in deporting folks as well. He have tightened up all the immigration laws and make it difficult for people to stay legally in the United States. It would renew the partnership that America had established with the rest of the world. As it is now, this president has gone on what you call an isolationist policy, not just America, but the rest of the world, Europe, especially in Great Britain, with their Brexit. It is more or less similar in nature, because America is saying now that they are concerned about America and America alone. And that's unfortunate, because the world now, there's a void in leadership in the world. And hence the reason why the whole world is on edge. They're looking forward to the day when America, the American president, would once again play his rightful role in the world as a world leader. And lately we have seen Macron in France. He has been trying to fill that void, but he has his hands full at home in France with the pandemic and the violence and all of that. So this election means a lot to the world, not just to Grenada and America, but the rest of the world, because the world needs a leader. They need someone to take charge, especially in times of a war, when we are fighting an unnamed and unknown enemy, and the consequences are severe, because COVID-19 has brought along with it economic challenges. Millions of people are out of work in the United States and the rest of the world, and we need to have a president who would set the tone and an economic agenda for recovery. But before you could talk about economic recovery, you first must have the virus under control, whether we have a vaccine, whether it's safe, and all of that, and to get the country and the world moving again.
Let's come a little closer to home now. While the U.S. battles their own uneasiness and anxiety with today's election, there is a bit of anxiety here at home following recent developments, recent situations. We could maybe zero in and say the relationship between police and civilians. And that was really brought to the fore more so following last Friday's fatal incident. Do you have any thoughts on the current climate in Grenada as it relates to police and civilians' relationship?
Of course, there's hardly anything I don't have any thoughts on relating to Grenada. Now, two things here. We had two shootings by the Royal Grenada Police Force against our young people. I think one, we need to have a civilian complaint review board whereby anytime a police officer discharges his weapon in the line of duty, a thorough investigation should be completed. And of course, the civilian review board should come in and investigate as to what happened, so we could get justice. The question of the police investigating the police is totally out of order. That's conflict of interest, of course. We have a Minister of National Security who is responsible for the police, and a minister who is also responsible for the youth. Now, in the situation in St. John's, if the Minister of National Security had come forward and reassured the nation that there's an incident involving the police shooting a young man in his home, an investigation would be carried out, and the results of this investigation would be made known to the public, and the public would be at ease so as to go about their normal business. The Minister of National Security was silent, and his silence is deafening. Now we have a situation in his own yard where the police shoot another young man. And I don't have all the evidence, but I don't want to prejudge all the details in the matter. But I believe the young man may have been in the possession of maybe a small quantity of marijuana. The Prime Minister, in a video clip that's circulating on the net, made some serious mistakes in his utterances. In that video clip, the Prime Minister is saying to the police, don't go after people with 2 ounces of marijuana. There are bigger problems in the country for you to deal with. Now, the police took an oath to protect and serve. That's the oath. The Prime Minister took another oath to solve the problems in the country. And he must not confuse the two. The Prime Minister controlled a commanding majority in the House of Representatives. The possession of marijuana is illegal under Grenada law. The Prime Minister's statement was like pouring gasoline on fire by saying to the police, look the other way. If the Prime Minister is of the opinion that the possession of marijuana is illegal, small quantities, then the Prime Minister needs to go to the Parliament and decriminalize marijuana, so that would ease up the police from carrying out their responsibilities, which is an oath they took, crime fighting. The Prime Minister must not give the police a shopping list as to what to charge for and what not to charge for. That in itself is interfering in due process. The Commissioner of Police should have a sit down with the Prime Minister, because they seem to be transmitting on 2 different frequencies. The Prime Minister is on one hand is saying, turn the other way for small quantities of marijuana. The Commissioner is saying something different. So the two of them must get together. But moreover, the police is doing their job. The Commissioner of Police is not a lawmaker. The Prime Minister is a lawmaker. And therefore, he must use the platforms available to him to decriminalize marijuana. Don't wait until election and jump on a platform and jump and whine and wave and tell the youths they can possess marijuana now. It is an issue. It's a burning issue. And if you feel so strongly about it, Prime Minister, for heaven's sake, legalize it and let the police do the work. How could you tell a policeman, don't arrest a youth for 2 ounces of marijuana? Don't charge him for 2 ounces of marijuana. But the same youth, if he's wearing a slippers, a same youth as a bus conductor, if he's wearing a slippers on a bus, you charge him for that. So the Prime Minister is sending mixed signal. And you know, he's accustomed to making those kind of statements and creating these 2 sets of laws. He went on to say that arrest men in jacket and tie. And I don't know if he's talking to the 15-year-old and 14-year-old. Yes, the police do arrest men with jacket and tie. And they did arrest Bishop Gilbert, who murdered young Robian. Bishop Gilbert was an executive member of the New National Party. And you could ask the policemen the difficulties they had before they could arrest him. And Bishop Gilbert was given specific advice when the police was on his tail. He ran into the Ministry of Finance, and what he was told, clear your name and go back to work. So yes, the police do their job. But sometimes they're handcuffed, depending on who commits the crime. So the Prime Minister have to be careful with words. And I want to say to him again, words matter. Address the nation. You should not just call the families of the youth who was shot in your constituency. You are not just a constituency representative. You are the Prime Minister of Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. And therefore, you should address the nation and put the nation at ease and stop inflaming tension between civilians and the police.
You mentioned the establishment of a civilian complaint review board. How you think this would be effective in what you're hoping it would accomplish? Who should make up the
Well,
board? What role would it
they're, they're,
have?
they're prominent citizens in the country. Um, the Conference of Churches, members, for a few people from youth groups, maybe people from the Bar Association, maybe a member of the Bar Association. The police commissioner could appoint someone from the Community Relations Department of the police force. They could be involved. We need to have a body that's not biased. You cannot have police investigating police. You know what the results would be. The gentleman who attacked the two police officers in St. George's, it was unfortunate. And that's a tragedy. And my heart goes out to the family of on both sides, the two police officers that were shot, and of course the man who is now deceased. Now, when you make those statements, it inflames the situation. In that complaint review board, a thorough investigation would be conducted. The results of the investigation would be disseminated to the public so that the public could be at ease and they know exactly what happened. As it stands now, we don't know what happened in St. John's. We don't know how this young man was shot in his home. We didn't hear from the Minister of National Security. We didn't hear from the parliamentary representative. All we're hearing is from the Commissioner of Police. And the Commissioner of Police is in a very difficult position. He's investigating his own men. And I'm saying to the Prime Minister, one is too much. The time has come where we must set up that civilian review complaint board. It could make up of the combination of it could be discussed. The composition of that board could be discussed. But for heaven's sake, we need to take the investigation away from the police. The police cannot shoot someone and the police investigating their own person who shoots someone. That itself is madness. But you know, the Prime Minister wouldn't do so because the Prime Minister loved to speak on both sides of his mouth. He wants to be all things to all men. On one side, he's putting words in the mouth of the young people by telling them the police must find work to do and leave you alone. And on one side, it is the same Prime Minister that wanted to go to Parliament and give the same police force the right to kick down your door and come inside your home without a warrant. Could you imagine that? It's the same police force. So if we see what's happening outside now, where unarmed young people are being shot, could you imagine if that law were to ever go into force when the police could just kick down your door and come inside your home without a warrant? I would have to ask for political asylum somewhere.
How can the police better their relationship? I don't think it's so bad, but just in case, how can the police better their relationship with civilians?
It is bad because you have one shooting in St. John, you have another one in Fontenoy, you have lots of complaints. I am not saying it's bad. The Royal Grenada Police Force traditionally was and probably is the best police force in the world. In Grenada, you can see policemen socializing in the community and interacting and what have you. Except lately, because the police force now is politicized. You have policemen acting as executive members of the New National Party, and they do so because the promotion system is not based on earned promotion. The promotion system is based on who you're supporting. So for one, we must have a fair system of promotion in the police force. We must depoliticize the police force, and we must set up a better public relation with the police and the community so as to ease that tension. And thirdly, the men and women in uniform, they are undergoing tremendous stress at the moment. The pandemic, a lot of them are home from their families. They have been working very long hours, in some cases without due compensation. And the question of the pension and the gratuity is at stake because these men and women now, some of them would be retiring shortly, and most of them are be retiring in poverty. All of this are weighing on the minds of the police. So we have to look at it in a holistic way. We have to distress the police, as a lot of them are working under duress. And I believe the Minister of National Security could help in that regards by sitting with the Commissioner of Police, having better working conditions for the police, look at salaries, and look at pension and gratuity. As it is now, people join the police force. They join the teaching service because they want to eat a food, because that's the only job available. We must make policing, once again, a noble profession where men and women join the police force because they want to serve the country, not because they can't find any other work to do. And I believe that is the direction that we must go. We must have better community. We must have meetings with communities. Wherever there is tension, you don't send in the rapid response unit. What you do, you bring the leaders of the community together. You involve the churches, you involve the youths, and you involve the community. And you see how you could find common grounds to ease the situation. No such was done. Had the Prime Minister just go into St. John's and ease the tension there and address the nation and say, look, that was an unfortunate incident. This is what happened. And we vow that justice would be done and this wouldn't happen again. We would not see that in Fontenoy. But to just sit back and do nothing and cast this aspersion as to who the police should charge and who they should not charge, I think he has poured gasoline on the fire, and he's responsible for the tension that's taking place right now between the police and civilians.
Mr. Baptiste, let's take a break and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. This is To the Point with former opposition leader and former Minister of Agriculture, Michael Baptiste. We'll be right back.
Sneezes spread diseases, so cover coughs and sneezes, please. Not with a rag or bandana. They trap germs. When you use the rag again, you put germs on your hands and everything else you touch. When you cough or sneeze, cover your mouth and nose with tissue. Throw the tissue in a bin and wash your hands afterwards. If you don't have a tissue, cough into your sleeve or elbow. Alcohol-based hand sanitizers are also effective in cleaning hands.
Wait to see my granddaughter.
Tony half. There goes again. He took me to a higher level, higher. Oh, Daddy Father blessing me. Oh, Daddy Father.
The world is brighter. I'm so much lighter since you came into my life, Lord. I am not the same.
Blessings flowing over here like a fountain. Don't make nobody treat
Welcome back to the Point, speaking with former opposition leader and former Minister of Agriculture Michael Baptiste. Issues of national importance. Let's move on to another recent development that a lot of people have had opinions on. The major development and infrastructure work to take place at the Morris Bishop International Airport to the tune of $67 million from the People's Republic of China. I see you smiling. Go ahead.
Well, that in itself is total madness. And again, a total disregard for the needs of the Grenadian people. We are into a pandemic. Revenues are down. Thousands of people are home without work, some of them on furlough, working 2 days a week. Agriculture is down as usual. Our health situation is in shambles. And I have to stress on the health because the situation at the hospitals are so bad. Most of the equipments there are not functioning. Doctors are discharging patients from the hospital because there's no medication. Those who can afford are given a prescription on their bedside, and the families have to go to the hospital, get the prescription, and go to the pharmacy to get that medication to bring back to the hospital so the hospital could dispense to the patient. So our hospital, the healthcare sector, at a time of the pandemic is in serious problem. We have a huge national debt that we are struggling to pay. As a matter of fact, the IMF was so concerned, the IMF, an international institution, was so concerned about Grenada reckless borrowing. They forced the government to go into Parliament and pass a law that they call the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The Prime Minister have yet to say to the nation how he circumvent that process. The Fiscal Responsibility Act came about as a result of Grenada defaulting on many loans that they had both locally and internationally. And locally, remember the NIS loans. These were monies that were borrowed, workers' monies that were borrowed by the government. Prime Minister was asking for a haircut. Our infrastructure is falling apart. At this time, this airport development project just don't make no sense at all. If we are going to go into debt, I believe that these monies could be better spent in helping to resurrect the agriculture sector. Farmers have difficulties getting to their lands to access nutmeg, for one, because the access roads are just not there. As I said, the hospitals, no medication, and our young people. This is a time where we should be concerning about food security, health, and the development of our youth resources, of our human resources in general. The Prime Minister recently, the minister responsible for youth, our youthful Minister of Youth, Dr. Mitchell, in a recent meeting in St. Mark's, when they were asked about what plans that they have for the youths, it was alarming to hear their response. One would have thought that the Prime Minister that sitting now in the departure lounge have taken over the Ministry of Youth. We would expect some revolutionary changes in the Ministry of Youth. We would expect some major announcement as to how we would rescue, how we would arrest the problem of hopelessness among our young people. Instead of this airport loan, this money could have been better spent in setting up centers around the country where we can get our young people involved in some skills training. It is not too late. And I heard the minister, the representative for St. Mark's, Ms. Modeste, saying to the youths that they don't know what you need, they need to come on the block. And I said to her, nonsense. Going on the block is not the appropriate place to find out what the youth need. From 1995 up to till this day, this government has spent over $200 million in the development of youth. This money could be better spent. The present Minister of Education is one of the guilty culprits. The cry of the youths today, lies squarely in the shoulders of the minister responsible for education today and the Prime Minister. She was minister responsible for youth. There have not been any significant changes. There's no platform as announced by this government for the development of young people. We had a system in place before where in our primary schools, there were counselors. You identify children at an early age, both in the primary and the secondary. You review that, you see their callings, and you direct them accordingly. You can't wait until they reach on the block. When George Bush said no child left behind, I think they misconstrued what he said. He said no child left behind. Yes, it does not necessarily mean academic education. The problem in the country today is that we are spending too much monies in the wrong direction. We are spending monies in areas where we are not getting the desired result. Why can't we just set up technical facilities around the country where our young people have an opportunity to go and learn a marketable skill? We are taking huge loans that we are burdening the future of the country to pay back, and they are not benefiting from none of these loans. The airport project does not have any impact on the economy today. The unemployment rate is still 65%. Though we heard about mega projects, a project in the north of the island, in Rivera, another one in Mount Hartman, yet our youths are unemployed. And the reason why they're unemployed, our youths are not given the proper education to meet the challenges of today's world. Gone are the days when we could believe that youth development only means becoming a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, or a policeman. There are so many disciplines out there where we could steer our youths in becoming a good plumber, electrician, a welder, fashion designer, a musician. The $200 million that we spent on youth could be better used. And now we are taking another $200 million and we're spending it on an airport that we don't need at this time. What we need at the time is food security, health, and youth development. And the people of Grenada must bring their representative into question. They must question the representative. We have a situation in Grenada today where our cities are flooding. St. George's, Grenville. Whenever it rains, because of climate change now, rain are falling longer and heavier. And we are seeing massive flooding taking place in Grenville town and St. George's. The former Minister of Works, Gregory Bowen, and the Minister of Finance then, Dr. Mitchell, they're pretending not to know what's taking place in Grenville town and the town of St. George and Tantine with the flooding. $1.5 million was given to a company in Holland to start the process of eliminating flooding in Grenville, Tantine, and St. George. We have not heard from the minister, the then Minister of Works, Mr. Gregory Bowen. We haven't heard from the Minister of Finance, and yet the problem remains. Whenever it rains, the people in and on Grenville town needs canoe, they need boat to get around Grenville. Those are areas of necessity. Our infrastructure is falling apart. And if we are going to borrow money, we must use this money wisely to stimulate our economy. and to take care of the infrastructure, to take care of agriculture, to develop our human resources so that tomorrow we can put the country on a better footing should in case we have another lockdown. Airports around the world now are closed. France, Germany, and Great Britain, they're shutting down tomorrow, which means the airport will be closed. Trinidad was shut down. This prime minister seems to have lost touch with reality. This is not a time for airport development. This is a time for food security and development of our human resources. And I want to say to the minister, to the leader of the opposition, you have been too quiet. You have been too quiet. Being outnumbered doesn't mean one thing. It don't mean nothing because you're outnumbered in parliament. I was a lone minister. I was own leader of the opposition in parliament. One man opposition member in parliament. The government at times used to send the operatives in Manjalu and destroy GBN transmitter so the people could not hear me. Let your voice be heard. And while we are in the leader of the opposition, you came out from the NNP and you criticized institution. You said that you're leaving the NNP because they're violating institutions, and we agree with you. But Brother Tobias Clement, you are now guilty of the same thing. You too are disrespecting institutions. The Senate, the Constitution called for a certain amount of people in the Senate. It's been months. You can't fill that third spot. So do your job and be more aggressive in discussing the people's issue in the parliament.
At this point in the program, let's invite our viewers and listeners who may have comments, questions, queries, concerns for Mr. Baptiste. This is your opportunity. 435-2041, that's the landline number. And that's also the WhatsApp number. Please, only written messages on WhatsApp. You can also post your comments, questions, queries, concerns on the GBN, Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page and the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel. Let's go to our first caller of the program. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to have a comment. Good morning.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, first, I have a comment for Mr. Baptiste, and I have one question, maybe more than one. Mr. Baptiste, something I'll say to you is, you was in Parliament as opposition leader, right? And I suppose you kept a lot of noise during your tenure. What I want to find out from you is, what did you do during those periods that you were there to make a difference in the lives of the Grenadian people? I sat here and I listened to you intently, and I heard you saying things like the Prime Minister should go to the people who get shot and have meeting and all them sort of a thing. I want to know, if you were Prime Minister, would you have brought your office that low when there is laws in place to deal with situations like the things that's happening with the police and public today? One, you've never been a police officer. You does not know the stress of the police department, and you're making statements relative to the things that happen with the police. You're making statements like weakness statements, but you just a listener like everybody else. First, you should get your facts straight. Two, question I want to find out from you is, how much money does the hospital, the health department collect from persons going and lying in the hospital for treatment? When you say things like the hospital does not have medication and all the like, don't you think the hospital has a responsibility to the people as well as the people has a responsibility to the hospital? Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Caller, you put, as they say, you put the ball on the wicket. Now, the hospital, that's where social services are performed. In our system, we have free medical. If the government is of the opinion that the hospital is a strain on the consolidated fund, and they wish to charge patients for going into the hospital, by all means, they talk about a national insurance. By all means, feel free to do so. People will know that when they go into the hospital, they have to pay. And if they don't have the money, they would make a decision whether they want to stay home and die or whether they want to go into the hospital for service. Our education system too. The schools don't collect nothing from the students. So to me, that question is irrelevant. Now, you ask of your humble servant, what have I done while I was in Parliament as it relates to the youths and all of that? And I'm glad you asked, because I'm happy to tell you. And please listen. In 2001, when there was no Imani, I recognized the plight of the young people, my brother. And what did I do? I enlisted the support of professional people. Plumbers, electricians, refrigeration technicians, auto mechanics, welders, architects, builders. I, Michael Baptiste, enlisted the support of those professional people. And I started a program called Practical Training for Practical People, my brother. I went out around the country, Hartford Village, Munich, St. James, Ladig, Montreach, and yes, in the parish of St. Mark's. Hundreds of youths were turning out at night in these community centers. When the government heard about the program and how successful it was, the government hastened to lock down the community centers on us. In upper capital, St. James, the youths there were so angry. They said, you know what? We're going to continue this class under the street light. And my brother, you know what? One of my students today are now electrical inspector in the Ministry of Works. And where did he learn? Under a street light in St. James. When it was raining, we went in the back of a shop in St. James, in small print shop in St. James. If you want to talk about youth development, go into these areas and ask the people there. They're not so young now. At the time, some of them was 15, 16. Ask them the record of Michael Baptiste. What role have I played in developing their lives? A lot of them today are now in the technical field. They're not committing suicide. You don't see them getting in trouble. I empowered them, my brother. It was the Prime Minister who saw that successful program, locked down the community centers, copy that program, rename it, and call it and call it now the Il-Feti Dimani. I started that program. And the records are there to prove, because my students are now working in the technical field, and I'm prepared to do it again, my brother, once time permit.
Somebody on Facebook is asking, you made a statement that there was tampering with GBN transmitters so people would not be able to hear your presentation in Parliament. Do you have any evidence, as this is a serious allegation?
Yes. The manager at the time, a Trinidadian, the fellow from Trinidad that was managing GBN at all, he called. The police were called in. Fitzroy Bido was the commissioner of police at the time. Fitzroy Bido was the commissioner of police at the time. The police announced that a thorough investigation would be completed. It's not something new. Even when I'm not in Parliament, leading up to the elections, the last elections, I made one phone call to George Grant radio station. And after making my contribution, my voice ricocheted across Grenada, Carrick, and PT Martinique to the point where the government shut down George Grant radio station the next day. They said that the songs of George Grant, Sunday with George Grant, was interfering with the broadcast on the airport. and they shut him down for a few days after I made an appearance on that program. So I have the evidence are quite there. It's there.
Somebody on WhatsApp is asking, what are your thoughts on the moving of the Hillsborough port to Harveyvale on the Sister Isle of Carriacou?
Well, I think it was unfortunate. I think there should have been consultation with the people. I think too that the people should have an input in it. I don't know if it was the decision of the former minister or the former representative for Carriacou and Petit Martinique, who high-handedly did this without consultation of the people. And while we on the Sister Isles, it is time that we set up a technical facility on the Sister Isles of Carriacou. Some of the students who are not academically inclined and want to acquire skill, they have to travel from Carriacou and Petit Martinique down to Grenada to go to Nulo. And by the way, let me say, Nulo is doing a much better job in the development of young people, much better job than the government is doing at TAM-CC. Because under TAM-CC, with this present Minister of Education, the one who have failed the youths have now been promoted to Minister of Education. And she's doing a terrible job, both now as Minister of Education. She has put thousands of teachers' lives in jeopardy at a time when we had the pandemic, where we had a case of a person coming from Canada or elsewhere, and they're roaming across the country, interacting with everyone, including school children. They are now calling for they are now removing social distancing from the school. And that to me is a serious mistake. You cannot want social distancing in the public and then yet in school, you're asking teachers to put their life at risk. So yes, caller, the removing of the port should not have been done without consultation with the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
No call. Somebody on WhatsApp is saying, we need you out of retirement and back into active politics. Is this something that you can consider?
Well, let me say to the caller, I am not retired. My politics did not come from a textbook. It didn't come from a university classroom. It came from a survival experience. And you know, in the words of the great philosopher Mark Bali, he said, "He who feels it knows it." So if the people is determined that I can continue to make a contribution towards the development in their lives, and I know that a lot of the young people have been asking for me to come back with your program, your successful program, Practical Training for Practical People, where thousands of young people learn a skill in whether it was refrigeration, whether it was electrical installation and solar technology. A lot of the youths are asking for that program to come back, and people are asking me to consider coming back. I am Grenadian, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to serve the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Hey, good morning, Brother Baptiste.
Good morning, my dear brother.
Yeah, one thing I want to find out from you. In Gary time and Maurice Bishop time, which one is the better time?
Thank you, caller.
You know, it's putting your mother against your father. Now, look. Uncle Gary, Sir Eric Gary, laid the foundation for development in Grenada. Number one, the development of the human resources, unsurpassed. He gave us technical wing. He gave us SGU. Our standard of education was much higher under Uncle Gary. Primary school students used to leave 7th standard and teach. Primary school children used to take what they call at the time, they used to write CXC. They used to write CXC from primary school and pass. We had about 8 or 9 principals who had never stepped foot in the door of a secondary school. He gave us though they say he was a dictator, he gave us a constitution that only you, the people, could change. Maurice Bishop picked up from where Uncle Gary left off. And he too did a lot of wonderful things. He continued with the CPE program. He continued with the utilization of our natural resources by utilizing our fruits and all of that and commercializing it. Not that we didn't have it, because we had the soap factory, we had 4 soft drink factories, we had the cottage industries, we had the lime factories, and we had all of that. But those are 2 great men. And when you look at the lives of these 2 great men, though they disagree politically, but when you compare them, you see that they are what's needed in Grenada. They have laid a foundation for the development of Grenada. Uncle Gary gave you a constitution, and he also gave you a pension and a gratuity scheme. And that pension and gratuity scheme came out of the 1951 revolution. People who work under Uncle Gary, today they're sitting home with their foot cocked up in the air. They retire in luxury. Those who are retiring under Dr. Mitchell are now retiring into poverty. When they get sick, they have to stand by the roadside with a hat and beg for contributions. So look at it today. So when you're talking about these 2 great men, sometimes I'd rather not compare them, but they are 2 of our national heroes. And we don't have a Heroes Day, but I pray that someday we would put these 2 men side by side and call them Grenada national heroes, Maurice Bishop and the late great Sir Harry Gary.
As we wind down, Mr. Baptiste, final question, agriculture. As a former Minister of Agriculture, and somebody on WhatsApp actually put my question into words as well. How do you think the agriculture sector can be revamped, can bounce back, specifically after COVID-19?
The Prime Minister recently, in his reshuffle, first he put himself as Minister of Youth. Nothing happening there with him, no big announcement. And then he put Peter David there. Agriculture needs more than Peter David. Agriculture needs financial, it needs institutional, it needs technical, and it needs leadership. Peter can maybe provide the leadership, but no one can, not a wise man or fool can work without tools. Agriculture under this new national party is not a priority. And we can see that by borrowing money to further advance tourism while the agriculture sector is in shambles. What we need to replant cocoa. We need to replant nutmeg. Grenada was once number 2. Guatemala have now taken over Grenada in terms of production of nutmeg. Grenada is at a distant number 8. All because after Ivan, this government under Dr. Mitchell did not see the need to help the farmers replant the agriculture sector, and therefore agriculture remained at the bottom of the ladder. Cocoa, Grenada is not even included in the top 10 cocoa producing countries. St. Lucia is producing cocoa, Ecuador producing, Ghana is producing, Brazil is producing. Though our cocoa was used for flavoring, our cocoa is dying a natural death. So we need a cocoa rehabilitation. We need to be self-sufficient in poultry. That is an industry that's begging for the taking. And if that $225 million that the Prime Minister borrowed was used wisely, we could be self-sufficient in poultry in the next 10 years, and the food import bill could cut down significantly. Not to leave out fishing. We must help our farmers for the total utilization of our marine resources. The time has come where we must help our people to help themselves. As it stands now, a lot of projects are being announced, but these projects are not having its desired impact. My brother, it is the first time in the history of Grenada that we have seen young people committing suicide. And I say to the Prime Minister, for heaven's sake, let us have a program where we can make Grenadians proud again. And we need to do so, and we can do so. All is not lost, my brothers and sisters. We can do it.
Mr. Baptiste, thank you so much for sparing some time with us this morning, and we've covered a wide array of topics, and I thank you this morning for being our guest. Continue to stay safe.
Thank you too, and you do the same, and the pleasure is mine, and a pleasant day to all the wonderful listeners out there. Continue to be safe, and may God bless everybody. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much, and stay safe. Let's continue to watch the U.S. elections and what happens today. Enjoy. Former opposition leader and former Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Michael Baptiste, our guest this morning. We thank him. We covered a lot of topics this morning, and that's the end of my time with you for the day. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, God willing. Up next is the Christmas Caravan with Janelle and JC, Joseph Cador. They'll be taking over at the top of the hour. Have yourselves a safe and productive Tuesday. Continue to be COVID smart. Walk with your hand sanitizers, wear your masks, get rid of the mosquito breeding sites, and continue to be safe. Have a good day, everybody.